Okay, I promised you that this should be important stuff, but we have to finish to realize that it's very important. But so far I've looked and mentioned the community rule and the Habakkuk commentary, or Pesher. Pesher is the Hebrew word for commentary. I've told you that, so I won't keep repeating it, but you should know I like the word Pesher because in the document it says Pesher HaDavar, the interpretation of the thing, or the interpretation of the material, or the interpretation of the sentence. Peshero, its interpretation. So it's called a Pesher because it's not a commentary, it's an interpretive document. So calling it a Pesher is probably the best thing to do using the original language. In addition, okay, I said that I did find where that problem was in terms of Mitsudo and Mitsuro. In Habakkuk 6, the one I was talking about, it does mention Mitsuro, and the sixth column rather. Habakkuk, see if I can give it to you here. Habakkuk 12. I will stand upon my watchtower and take my stand upon my fortress. So one is watchtower, the other is fortress. Mitsuro is the fortress. And here in the Damascus document, it says, "I will." They will stand. Each man will stand upon his own Mitsudo, not Mitsuro. Now, I don't know if that is a copyist mistake. So to call it watchtower really isn't sure, as the translator does. That's what I was trying to point out. So the difference is and R is this, and Dalet, I don't know if I can get the Dalet, but anyway, the Dalet is, I forget how it is written, but anyway, it's sort of like, it's this. I can't get it, but anyway, it's sort of like that. But the point is, it's slightly different shape. So the question is it a copyist mistake? Not that it matters. I'm just saying there is a question there. I haven't seen the column 4 parallels. Why am I questioning it? Because it says each man will take his stand on what? On his watchtower or his own net? If it is his own net, I think it means his own record. If it's on his own watchtower, what's he watching out for? So I think probably it is net, actually. Even now that I think it probably is net. And then, of course, you have the 3 nets of Belial, which is just the opposite. Okay, let's go on. So we did column 6, basically, where we get the three going out, 3 groups, or going out and from the land of Judah to dwell in the land of Damascus. And we did all of basically everything to separate between holy and profane, to keep the Sabbath, according to the commandment. Those entering the new covenant in the land of Damascus. That's what's going on here. A new covenant doctrine. These are new covenanters. The New Testament really means new covenant. That's what it really goes back to. So I mean, this is a different new covenant than the New Testament. So the question is dating. Someone said, oh, is it dating? Is that what you're worried about? Well, the content, anyone can read the content, so I'm not worried about the content. Yeah, I'm worried about the dating, which can deepen or not deepen the content. And you have to decide from what you know now, what you think is reasonable. You can't just say, oh, this scholar says that, therefore I depend on it, or vice versa, I say this and therefore you depend on it. You have to use your own judgment. You have to make or don't make a judgment if you're unqualified to do so. But then you're just parroting other people's views. I don't think that we like to parrot Clinton or Bush or Reagan or any of these people who are in the debates in these things. We like to make up our own mind. So I'm trying to give you the material on which to make up your own mind. So I'm pointing out to you what I consider the internal things that point to a 1st century AD dating here. And I think for sure, the first people who saw this document thought this was a Jewish Christian document, meaning a document of the Ebionites. And that was what some of the early scholars who saw this in the 1910s and 20s thought. I still think that they're right. But it's a kind of odd kind of Jewish Christianity. It's a very aggressive messianism, is what it is. A very aggressive messianism. To set up the holy things according to their precise specifications, column 6, to love each man his brother as himself, the royal law according to the scripture of James. I can't give you can't go back and get it for you. And to keep away from fornication. That is exactly what Acts 15 says James says. Keep away from fornication. That's what he says to Paul at the end of the so-called Jerusalem conference that's described in Acts 15, where James writes a letter that is taken down to Antioch. And you read Acts 15 and Acts 21 and you'll see these things. Well, the perfect holiness we get in line 5, the faithfully promising them that they would live for 1,000 years. Now we suddenly get manuscript B. Manuscript B is only 2 columns, so we often just call it columns 19 and 20. It isn't really columns 19 and 20 because it's in a different handwriting. Even I'd love to do the paleography there because the 2 handwritings are so different. In the Cairo Geniza, the one document and the other, they're both written in the 11th century AD, so what would the paleographers say about the scribes who wrote those? I mean, they're as different as night and day. You wouldn't even put them in the same universe in terms of scribes. 19 and 20 look much older handwriting. This one, columns we've been reading so far from manuscript A, this manuscript B is 19 and 20. From manuscript A, look like the way it was written today, block sort of letters. Anyway, call that Babylonian writing. So here's where manuscript B cuts in. Now, there probably was more to manuscript B than is in the Cairo Geniza, but that's all they had. Manuscript B adds, promising them that they would live for 1,000 generations, as it is written, keeping the covenant and the grace or the piety or the goodness, but the word I think is grace. Promise to those who love him. By the way, those who love and keep my commandments for 1,000 generations. So Deuteronomy 7:9 is what's being quoted in manuscript B. Going back to manuscript A. And if they are living in the camps, as per the rule of the law, so here we get reference to camps, people living in camps. Manuscript B adds, as per the laws of the land as they were of old, living in the camps as per the laws of the land as they were of old. So otherwise it's the same as manuscript A. So manuscript B picks up there. That's the first line of column 19. I don't know if I'm confusing you, but there's 2 documents in the Cairo Geniza. One we call manuscript A, which we've been reading, which is about, well, I only give you about 8 columns of it. But it actually goes up to about actually has about 16 or 17 columns. Must have 18 columns because then they call manuscript B column 19 and 20. It doesn't pick up from column 18 of manuscript A. What it rather does, and that's what's so confusing, it overlaps column 7 and 8 of manuscript A. It overlaps column 7 and 8 of manuscript A. That is columns 19 and 20, how we number manuscript B, overlap columns 7 and 8 of manuscript A. But it just doesn't overlap, it adds material. And it has things more or less the same spirit, but different materials to some extent. And that's what's so incredible, because the material, particularly in column 20, doesn't exist in manuscript A. It only exists in manuscript B. So what did I want to know when I wrote the letter to get access to the scrolls back in 19... You see why we wrote that letter, 30, 40 years have gone by and it showed us nothing. Can we say these things are parallel in the Dead Sea Scrolls? And it turns out some of the materials from column 19 and 20 are parallel in materials from cave 4. But of course it's not a whole manuscript like this, just bits and pieces. So we don't know how the manuscript actually would have read. I think the manuscript was still in the process of being written when they were deposited in the caves. There were different versions of the manuscript because people were still working on it when they were destroyed. Another argument for 1st century rather than 2nd century BC. That's the big argument. I mean, is this a 2nd century BC document or is it a 1st century AD document? I mean, there's nothing in it that can identify it either way, just how it reads. Now here's a new thing, the camps. We're going to get the camps in the War Scroll and also in the MMT, the letter document that I told you about. The letter to some ruler probably overseas and it talks about camps. Anyway, and they take wives and they beget sons. They shall walk in accordance with the Torah, according to the statute, as they were instructed, which speaks about between a man and his wife, between a father and a son. This is all from Numbers and Deuteronomy. Back to the people it doesn't like. End of line 9. But all those rejecting, that is the commandments, will be paid the reward on evil ones. Remember that? And they will be paid their reward. Where do we read that? In the community rule. We just read it. They will pay the evil ones their reward. Now, they will be paid the reward on evil ones. When? Third time used, when God visits the earth. Third reference to a visitation by God. I suppose when God visits the earth to do what? Pass judgment or something. Or just to clean it out. I'm not sure which. It looks like it's more like a cleaning out, don't you think? I'm not sure. Because they're going to live for 1,000 generations or something like that. They're just going to clean things up here. Get rid of all this lowlife. Okay, now manuscript A and B really separate, and I have them in 2 separate columns in my book, and that's why I think I did that on purpose in this book. Vermes just puts it in parentheses. I'll read you manuscript A, and I'll sometimes read manuscript B when it's different. When God visits the earth, when there will come to pass the word which is written in the words of Isaiah, son of Amos the prophets, which say, there shall come upon you and upon your people and upon the house of your father days, the like of which have not come since the day Ephraim departed from Judah. Isaiah 7:17. Manuscript B rather says, when God visits the earth, when there shall come to pass the word which is written by the hand of Zechariah the prophet. That's a different passage and a different text. Long. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd and against the man who is my companion, saith God. Strike the shepherd, this is manuscript B, and scatter the flock, and I will stretch my hand out over the little ones. Zechariah 13:7. Then it goes on to analyze this passage. The keepers of him, from Zechariah, are the meek of the flock. They're the keepers of the covenant, the keepers of the law. They shall escape in the era of the visitation, another reference to visitation. I'm in manuscript B now. But the rest shall be given over to the sword. This says given over to the sword. It doesn't say delivered up. You'll see in line 13 of manuscript A, and all those who turn back were delivered up to the sword. It's a different word in here. One says given over, the other says delivered up. He said, what do I need to know this for? I think it's important to see the 2 manuscripts and to see what we've got going on here. Same spirit. But the rest shall be given over to the sword and here it is, with the coming of the Messiah of Aaron and Israel. And it is singular. Now Vermes usually puts it plural. Messiahs of Aaron and Israel. Coming is a singular verb, a mod. If it's plural, it's omdim. And the usage is singular. Now that puzzled scholars, so they talked about Messiah of Aaron and Messiah of Israel as if it was dual, but it's Moshiach Aaron v'Israel, meaning, according to the first interpreters of this document, way back when it was first found, before the new scholars got a hold of it in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they thought it looked like a Jesus-type person. Why? Because it had two bloodlines in him, priestly and royal or lay. Now, if you look at the letter to the Hebrews, Jesus is called a high priest by the order of Melchizedek, pure and unpolluted high priest above, etc., etc., etc. And then he's also supposed to be a king descended from David. So he's both high priest and king according to Christianity. That's how Christianity's always seen him. Well, that's just another way of saying what this is saying. The Messiah of Aaron and Israel, the priest and Israel Messiah as one person. And it's not anointed one, I can assure you. It says Messiah. And, you know, anyone who says anointed one here just is a believer in Christ and doesn't want to admit there's any other Messiah walking around the earth. It's fine, you can believe in Christ, but you can't, you can't change the language here because you don't like the word Messiah. You put anointed one here. It means anointed one perhaps, but it says Messiah. Anyway, and it's going to be used several times. With the coming of the Messiah of Aaron and Israel, as it was in the era of the first visitation. This is very confusing. I try to go into it in great detail in my New Testament Code book. Concerning which, that's why I said this is the most important material in the documents. Concerning which God said by the hand of Ezekiel, put a mark on the foreheads of those who cry and weep. Ezekiel 9:4. And then it continues over into column 8, while the backsliders were given up or delivered up to the sword. Now there, manuscript B starts to agree with manuscript A again. That is, while the backsliders were given up to the sword. Now let's go back to manuscript A, column 7. What I just read you'll find, confusing as it is, in column 19. I don't have the book in front of you, it's going to really be confusing. Okay. Okay, this is an awful time. Not since the day Ephraim departed from Judah have we seen days like this, when east, north, and south split. Ephraim is the word in Isaiah for the northern kingdom. Judah is the name of the southern kingdom. When the two houses, there it is, of Israel separated, they even go on and say it. Ephraim departed from Judah. See, they use Ephraim for Israel in the north. Because Jacob's son Joseph had two sons at the end of Genesis. Who were they? Ephraim and Manasseh. And then Jacob gave the blessings to Joseph's sons. And Joseph attested, if you remember, I think it's Genesis 49. And he blesses Ephraim first. And Manasseh is the older. And Joseph protested, Father, you've got it wrong. You know, Manasseh is the oldest, he should get the better blessing, and then Jacob says, I have blessed and I shall bless. And the thing is that Ephraim gets the biggest conquest. That's the area that we now call Judah and Samaria, because Ephraim is where Joshua was settled. Joshua is a descendant of Ephraim, if you know your genealogies. And Joshua is the hero of the northern kingdom. And that's Shechem. I can show it to you. I don't have time to do all this, but just quickly show it to you. Oh, my pen is gone again. Okay, let's see if I can get it for you. So here's Jerusalem. This is the northern kingdom. This is Ephraim. That's where all the trouble today between the Israel Palestinians are. This is Judah. And this is Joshua's area. and this is Judah's area, and Ephraim is Joshua's tribe. And at the end of the book of Joshua it says, and Joshua got an estate in the highlands of Ephraim, and that's Shechem, Samaria, all the famous names, Bethel, all the famous names that we know from the Bible. All those are in Ephraim. Joseph got two portions. Manasseh, partly on one side of Jordan, the other part is over in Transjordan. Don't tell the peace conference in Annapolis this. The Jordan isn't even on the table, as far as I'm aware. Although I don't know why it isn't on the table, because the British just cut it off from the mandate for Palestine and gave 2/3 of the mandate for Palestine to the house of the Sharif of Mecca for services rendered in the First World War. And no one ever utters a peep about it. And whereas in the original mandate for Palestine there was room to deal with the territorial claims of two peoples, by the time they cut 2/3 of it away, there was no longer room enough in the 1/3 that was left to deal with the issues we had before us. And so the whole mess began back in the 1920s, but no one goes back that far. And so people are lucky that people have short memories. I'd put it all on the table if we're going to negotiate things. Anyway, if I believed in the Bible, I sure would put it all on the table. So, and all those who turned back were delivered up to the sword, but those who were held fast, there's that holding fast, steadfastness again, escaped to the land of the north. When did they escape to the land of the north? In the Roman period here, or that we're having here, or we're talking about escaping to in the Babylonian captivity? I don't know. I think maybe we're talking about this period here somewhat. That's what's so confusing about all these delivering ups. As he said, I will exile the tabernacle of your king and the basis of your statutes from my tent of Damascus. Now this is a really weird one. This is Amos 5:26. Now this, like Zechariah and the other one, this is manuscript A. It's going to be interpreted. Pesher, if you like. The books of the Torah, these are the tabernacle of the king. So the word tabernacle of the king are for these people the books of the Torah. Once again, and it says books, by the way, not rolls. It says separate. Very strange. As he, God, said, I will establish the tabernacle of David, which has fallen. Another passage from Amos 9:11. The king is the community. Oh, well, in Christianity, in Paul's letters, Jesus is the community. And the members of his body are the members of the community. It's just slightly different imagery than you get in Corinthians. 2nd century BC or 1st century AD? Did Paul study here? Was he originally part of this community? In my view, yes. Then he took doctrines that he learned here and moved on with them in a different manner. That's my personal view. I can't prove that. It's just what I personally think. I haven't studied these things. He uses so many of the doctrines that I don't. Jesus was here. I can't speak about that. I know what Paul said because I have his letters, and most people acknowledge that a certain number of them are authentic. Gospels are another question. There was no tape recorders around that time. I can't depend on the Gospels as I can in Paul's letters. That's all I can do. To me, Paul's letters are primary documents. Gospels are secondary documents, derivative documents. Maybe they're accurate. Maybe they have some polemical point to make. In any case, the king is the community. The basis of the statutes, they are the books of the prophets. It's a strange view of things. Whose words Israel despised. This is anti-Israel in a way, too. Something like the New Testament sometimes is. And now the star, he wasn't even mentioned here. But it's going to be mentioned a couple of lines later. Numbers 24:17, the star prophecy. The star is the interpreter of the, I think it is Torah, who came to Damascus. I have lawyer, but it probably should be Torah. And we had him already mentioned, didn't we, in column 6? Who came to Damascus. as it is written, a star shall go forth from Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. Well, we also hear about the star over Bethlehem in the Jesus story and so on. We hear about the star and the Jewish messianic leader, an individual named Bar-Kokhba in the 2nd century, who led the second war against Rome. His initial name was Bar-Kokhba, but somehow he changed that name to Bar-Kokhba. Kokhba in Hebrew means star, son of the star. It's in this thing here, the Kokhba, the star. I don't know what it all means. I can just tell you what's going on. Can't tell you the final. I'm not, I'm not Reverend whoever knows all the answers to this. But this is the first usage of the star prophecy. The second usage is in the War Scroll. The third usage is in those testimonia I read you last time. 3 times the star prophecy is in the extant materials at Qumran. Now, at the end of the Jewish war, I don't have time to read it to you now because I have to stick to this document. Hopefully I'll do it next time maybe. Josephus says, when he's interpreting the signs for the destruction of the temple, one of the signs is that I think a cow gave birth to a lamb. Another sign is that there are heavenly forces rushing through the heavens that they could hear and see. A third, cow giving birth to a lamb, that was a real funny one. A third one is that the people in the temple heard a voice crying, and there was clattering, "Let us go forth," and they slammed the doors behind them. God leaving the temple. These were all the signs of the destruction of the temple, according to Josephus. At the end of the Jewish war, you can read them yourself. And then he says, but the thing that most moved our young men to revolt against Rome was an obscure prophecy from among their religious tracts that a world ruler would come out of Palestine. Oh, wow. You mean he forgot to tell us that earlier in the Jewish war? That the Jewish war was a messianic uprising? That the thing that most moved our young men to revolt against Rome was an obscure prophecy from among their religious texts that a world ruler would come out of Palestine? There are 2 parts of that obscure prophecy. One is here in the Numbers, star will rise out of Jacob, a scepter to rule the world. And the second one comes in Isaiah, and I'll show it to you. We even have it in the Isaiah Peshers from Qumran. I can't give it to you right off the top of my head. But I think it is, and Lebanon shall fall by a mighty one. And I'll explain why that's also part of the Messianic prophecy. But look here. What am I saying? What is Josephus saying? We didn't read all of Josephus. That the war that he describes against Rome was, the engine behind the war was the Messianic prophecy. What's the engine behind Christianity? The Messianic prophecy. How is Christianity presenting the Messianic prophecy? As a pacified, loving, turning of the cheek, non-vengeful. Well, sometimes he's vengeful. He kicks the money tables over. He says, don't think I've come to bring peace. I've come to bring a sword. He's a mixed presentation, but mostly he's a peaceful chap who does supernatural things. But nothing very aggressively, just curing people, raising dead, spitting in people's eyes and things, making the blind see and the deaf hear, paralytics walk, and all that kind of thing that really the Mediterranean world would have loved. Asclepius too. Do you know who Asclepius was? The god of curing for the Greeks. They'd go to all these shrines and they would throw away their crutches and things and hope that Asclepius, the man god, would cure them, etc. It's all around the Mediterranean. We don't know these things, but that's just the way it was. Okay, so manuscript B is definitely messianic. They shall escape from the hour of the visitation, but the rest shall be given over to the sword with the coming of the Messiah of Aaron and Israel. He's not happy fellow, this Messiah of Aaron and Israel. And they had manuscript A. And the star is the interpreter of the law who came to Damascus, or the interpreter of the Torah. As it is written, a star shall go forth and take a scepter to rule the world. The scepter is the prince of the whole congregation. And with his standing up, he shall utterly destroy all the sons of Seth. Standing up, or rising, or resurrection. The word is stand up in Ezekiel, and they stood up, the bones of vast and immense army. Is it resurrection? That's the way Hebrew would express resurrection. Or is it simply coming? Now, manuscript B does say coming. It isn't standing up. It says ad ba. Ba in Hebrew is coming. When the Messiah ran as Israel comes. This says literally standing up. Anyway, I don't know what to make of it. I asked the question at the conference last week that got them sort of worked up. I said, if you were looking at this material just without carbon testing, parameters, paleography, or so on, if you saw this Nasi Kol Ha'edah, the prince of the entire congregation, who was also a messianic person, what would you think it pertained to? I said, you don't know. I said, well, what about Bar Kokhba? I don't say this is from the Bar Kokhba period, but he called himself Son of the Star, a messianic appellation, and on his coinage he was called Nasi Israel. Nasi Israel doesn't mean king of Israel. It means, like it says here, sort of like ruler or prince of the entire congregation. There's a person who in his own being had both of these characteristics applied to him. What happened to Bar Kokhba? Oh, he was killed in a terrible battle in a place called Betar, outside of Bethlehem. Much worse than any of the battles of the First War. But we don't have any Josephus to tell us about it. We just know that the Roman commander did not apply the usual formula when he reported it back to the Senate. I and my army are well. He didn't say that. And later, Bar Kokhba was executed by the Romans, and I think he was brought to Rome in a victory parade. He was trying to rebuild the temple, by the way. That was one of the things Bar Kokhba was trying to do. In any case, the rabbis hate Bar Kokhba in the rabbinic literature for some reason. The only rabbi in the rabbinic literature who loves Bar Kokhba is Rabbi Akiva, who is considered the Zealot rabbi. If you've ever heard of him, he lived in this period because he applies the messianic prophecy to Bar Kokhba. And the other rabbis laugh at him according to the rabbinic testimony. And they say, Akiva, grass will grow on your grave before the Messiah comes. And Akiva is given a terrible death at the hands of the Romans. He's tortured, flailed, and pulled apart by horses, according to the Talmudic discussion of his end. So I would say that Akiva was the prophet of the Bar Kokhba uprising. Both went down in a pretty bad way. But Akiva is a favorite rabbi among the rabbis, the only Zealot rabbi in the rabbinic literature. One other one is a favorite one. I have both of these rabbis in a lot of detail in my New Testament code. His name is, I think it's spelled like this. I think that's Eliezer Bar Hyrcanus. He was considered a sympathizer to Jesus of Nazareth in the rabbinic literature. And there's some material I give in my New Testament code book about a story he heard. It's in several places in the Talmud about Jesus the Nazarene, or Jesus from Nazareth, or Jesus the Nazarene, or Jesus the Nazarene, or Jesus the Nazarite. And he heard it from a person called Jacob of Sichnin. or Jacob of Pharsakanya, which is a village in Galilee. Jacob, of course, is James. So he met a guy called James, or Jacob. And the story was a very funny story, which shows Jesus had a good sense of humor in this presentation. Jacob of Barsaknin, or Varsakanya, says that one day he met Jesus, the Nazarene, and he asked him, or someone asked him, what should you do with the wages of a prostitute given to the temple? What should you do with the wages of a prostitute given to the temple? Now we're in our prostitute imagery, you know, the New Testament Jesus sits with prostitutes and sinners and tax collectors, and all those are charged things. I think prostitutes are simple as Herodians because they were looked upon as no better than prostitutes and so on. In any case, he says, use them to build an outhouse for the high priests. Use them to build an outhouse, or use a latrine, pardon me if you prefer. Use them to build a latrine for the high priest. I don't know. I don't know if you think that's funny. I think that's really funny. But in any case, is that an authentic saying of Jesus? I don't know. But this Eliezer Bar Hyrcanus knew someone who knew Jesus and was considered sympathetic. So he was criticized a lot in the Talmud, but he was also presented as a very important pupil of another teacher, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the one who had the arrow shot into Vespasian's camp, calling Vespasian the world ruler that would come out of Palestine. So they're all playing with this material. I forgot to mention one thing. You know, when it said they do not separate in the temple, and each man lies with a woman in her period. You see, this is how Herodians or foreign kings would be perceived. This would be like a scurrilous, slanderous thing said about them. Oh, they're all sleeping with these women in their periods, like their foreign wives and everything like that. They don't observe Hebrew, purity regulations. So it isn't the high priest; it's the Herodians who would be perceived like that. So I think again that's an allusion to the non-Jewishness of the Herodian family. They're all sleeping with women in their periods. The priests are polluted because they're taking their appointment from the Herodians after the Maccabees are slaughtered by Herod. And after the last Maccabean, Miriam's brother, Jonathan, that you have in Josephus, if you read him carefully, is drowned in the pool in Jericho because when he put on the high priestly vestments, the people started to weep. That's something like Joe Stalin or Saddam Hussein or Hitler would do. And I think Herod ranks right up there. He ranks right up there. In my mind, if you want to blame anyone for the destruction of the Jewish people at the time of Jesus and in Rome, it isn't the death of Jesus. It's Herod. Herod almost single-handedly destroyed the Jewish people. It's frightening to see what he did. And just a complete maniac. The closest to him that we've seen in our time is Saddam Hussein, the way he behaved, killing his in-laws and anyone who opposed him, and the mirth he took at these things. And Stalin was like that. He thought all this was a big joke when he had people go out and shoot themselves, or he'd listen to the accounts of the torture and see if they began to beg for mercy. That would give him a lot of pleasure and stuff like that. Josephus says Herod went out in disguise and used to listen to the complaints of the people about him. Then he'd have them all arrested, taken to Macaros, where John the Baptist was beheaded, and have them tortured and put to death. And Josephus was, not an enemy of the establishment. Terrible period. Anyway, this is very hopeful literature in that period. And he shall utterly destroy all the sons of Seth. These escaped in the era of the first visitation, while the backsliders were delivered up to the sword. column 8. And this also will be the judgment on all those who enter this covenant. I'm going to read fast now because I want to do 8 and 9 and be done with this. So we can get on to the community rule next time and the Habakkuk Pesher next time, and then finish up with an assortment of things the last purpose. On all those who enter this covenant who did not hold fast to the laws, their visitation, fourth visitation, will be for destruction by the hand of Belial. This is the day on which God commandments, or again, the word is actually visit. It can be visit or command. Manuscript B adds, and he said, the princes of Judah are those who are removers of the bound. Now watch this. Upon whom wrath shall be poured. That's Hosea. Now we're talking about the princes of Judah. I would say that has to do with the rulers, the leaders of the present Judea. For they have become diseased without cure. Maccabees or Herodians. Let's keep it in mind. And he will exterminate them, since all of them are rebels, manuscript B adds, since they came to the covenant of repentance, but have not turned aside from the way of traitors. Here's that traitor usage we're going to get again in the Habakkuk commentary. Rather than, and if you like, Judas Iscariot, if you think of it that way, rather they have immersed themselves or wallowed in the ways of fornication and evil riches. And they have been vengeful, and each man has borne malice against his brother, each man hating his brother, that is not loving him. And each man has sinned against the flesh of his own flesh, that is taken near relatives to wed, that is niece marriage. Approaching them for fornication again. And they have used their power for riches and profiteering. We'll hear about profiteering again in the Habakkuk Covenant. Each man doing what was right in his own eyes and choosing the stubbornness of his own heart. For they did not keep apart from the people, or possibly peoples, that is, the non-Jews. Again, the root keeping apart, NZR, here is the same as Nazareth. And have knowingly sinned, walking in the way of evil ones, about whom God said, their wine, this is another good one, is the venom of vipers. Again, that generation of viper stuff. And the cruel poison of asps. Their wine is the venom of vipers, and the cruel poison of asps, quote Deuteronomy 32:33. The vipers are the kings of the peoples. There's that term, the kings of the peoples. That is a known term in Roman jurisprudence. It meant kings of the minor republics in the eastern parts of the empire. Now, I don't think I have to go any further than that, too, to prove that they're talking. That's a Roman legal term. Peoples are ethne in Greek, Gentiles in the English American translation. Paul is the apostle to the peoples, the ethnic. You can read the Greek in the New Testament if you like. So the peoples are on the eastern Mediterranean, the kings of the peoples. Elsewhere, the Roman emperor didn't need kings beneath him. From Spain to Greece, there were no kings. But further east, there were all kings. Cilicia had a king, and lots of other places. Several places in Syria and in Palestine and further east. Okay. The vipers are the kings of the peoples. Their wine is their waves. Now remember, yayin is wine in Hebrew. Y-yud-nun, yayin. Our wine, I think, comes from that word yayin. Wine and yayin are very close. And the poison of asps is the head of the kings of Greece. Now here people say, oh, you see, we're in the Greek period. Are we? Is not the Roman emperor the head of the kings of Greece? That is the Grecian-speaking kings of Asia Minor, Syria, and elsewhere. No, Greek was spoken in all those places. So you say, you're stretching it, Eisenman. Maybe. You see, the yayin plays on Yavan, which we already know now from your identification as Yavan, Y and J are interchangeable. It plays on the word Greece. Yain plays on Yavan. Wine, yain, in Hebrew is underlying text. Then also, rosh, poison, is also a homonym for rosh head. They love to play on things. Rosh is poison in Hebrew, it's also head. So you see, the poison of asps becomes the head of the Grecian kings, or the head of the Greek-speaking kings, or the head of the kings of Greece, if you prefer. But in any case, the poison goes into head. It's real weird the way they're playing. I don't know if you follow it, but I have it in a parenthesis in my translations. Who comes to execute vengeance upon them. Well, I don't think the head of the kings of Greece came to execute vengeance upon them, except maybe, well, even Alexander wasn't the head of the kings of Greece. The only one who came to execute vengeance upon them, who's head of the kings of Greece, is the Roman emperor and the Roman generals. That's, again, I don't see in the way. And now we're back to the wall, the builders of the wall, the daubers with plaster. Zalzal, who will surely spout, is reprised here. You see that? See that? You know? 12. Well, what does it say? The daubers with plaster is Zalzal. Earlier. It doesn't say Zalzal here. It said it earlier.
Doesn't say here.
Well, what does he say there?
It says, but all these things, the builders of the wall and those daubers with plaster.
Well, the daubers with plaster relates to the Zalzal episode earlier that you had. Again, it's from Ezekiel 13:10. The prophets who cry peace when there is no peace. I know one of these guys crying peace when there is no peace, but I'm not going to mention who that is. But his first name begins with S or P. In any case, they're daubers with plaster. They're led by Zalzal. That's earlier, not here. Who will surely spout, and have not understood, because one of confused wind, a windiness person. The word is ruach, which also can mean spirit in the sense of Holy Spirit. Wind and spirit being homonyms in Hebrew. This could possibly even be windbag, someone of windiness or of confused windiness or spirit. Manuscript B has walking in the Spirit. Well, that's closer to someone else we know who walks in the Spirit. Probably correct. And the actual quotation from Micah 2:11 upon which the passage is based. And guess who appears again? Just like the spouter earlier. And the spouter of lying spouted to them, which kindles God's wrath on all his congregation. I don't know how Vermes can think that I think the spouter of lying is the wicked priest. The spouter of lying is an internal person who has a different ideology than the righteous teacher, for instance. He spouts lies. He's not an establishment figure. He doesn't command anything. On all his congregation, you could read there on all his church. But we don't know what's going on here exactly. But they don't understand what Moses said. Not for your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart are you going to possess these nations more grace, Deuteronomy 9:5, but because of his love for your fathers and his keeping the oath. I told you it's full of that idea that not for your sake that God is doing that, but his love of your fathers. And this is the judgment upon the penitents of Israel. Okay, back to the penitents of Israel. We've had them once before. Although the priests who went out to dwell from the land of Judah to dwell in the land of Damascus, who turned aside from the way of the people. What it is, I don't know. Because, and then a new sentence. Because God loved the first who testified on his behalf, manuscript B, testified on behalf of the people before God. He loved those coming after them. Again, more grace ideology here of an Old Testament kind. Because theirs is the covenant of the fathers, and because of his hatred for the builders of the wall, back to the builders of the wall again, his anger was kindled against them. You have to read Ezekiel to know what Ezekiel says about the builders of the wall. Manuscript B adds against them and against all those walking after them. And this is the kind of judgment that will be upon all those who reject the commandments of God. By the way, I don't think the allusion to the penitents of Israel in line 16 is negative there. It looked negative, but I don't think it probably is. It's negative about these other people here. the ones who reject the commandments and forsake them, turning away in their stubbornness. This is the word which Jeremiah spoke to Baruch the son of Neriah, and Elisha to Gehazi his servant. These are reprimands given by Elisha to Gehazi, who's considered one of the evil ones in the Talmud. In fact, and I don't like to make a fuss about it, Gehazi is often considered a stand-in for Paul in the Talmud. This also is possibly a code. I'm not trying to overdo it, I'm just saying possible. Elisha, these are the words Jeremiah spoke to Baruch and Elisha to Gehazi. All the men who entered, remember Gehazi was doing things for prophets, supposedly. It's in the book of Kings 2. All the men who entered the new covenant, the land of Damascus, but turned back and betrayed and turned aside from the fountain of living waters will not be reckoned in the foundation and shall not be inscribed from the day of gathering, and things come to a break here. At this point, we are in column 20 of manuscript B. In my book. In your book, I don't know where you are, but in my book, you see column 8 stopped. From the day of the gathering of the teacher of the community until the standing up or rising of the Messiah from Aaron and from Israel, and again this is definitely singular, and this is the judgment on any member of the assembly of the men of perfect holiness. Again, perfect holiness is a term Paul uses in 2 Corinthians 7:1, who hesitate to do, again the Jamesian language of doing, the commands of the upright or straight. He is the man who is melted in the furnace, Ezekiel 22:21. According to the appearance of his work shall he be expelled from the assembly, or church. So this person, whoever is not standing up straight and doing the commands and walking in purpose, there are people who expel. Now Josephus talks about how the Essenes expel backsliders. I think that's what's going on here. I want to hurry through this because I want to get the end of this before this period comes to an end, if you'll let me. Then you'll have the whole of the Damascus document to consider. He is the man who was melted in a furnace. According to the appearance of his works, he shall be expelled. Josephus speaks about that from the assembly, like someone whose lot had never fallen, and now they have a different name for themselves, among the disciples of God. Now they call themselves the disciples of God. Earlier they were the perfect of the way. According to his rebellion, the men of knowledge shall punish him until the day he returns, like we heard earlier a little bit, to stand in the presence of the men of perfect holiness. The group is the men of perfect holiness. I think that they are absolute Nazarites, totally perfect, holy people. And his works are revealed according to the letter and interpretation of the Torah, in which the men of perfect holiness walk. Nor shall anyone cooperate with him in purse and work. This is avodah, that is toil, activity, not ma'asim, as like works. If you remember Acts 15:38, when Paul is going to start out again after the Jerusalem conference, Barnabas refuses, or Paul refuses, Barnabas refuses to travel with him, and John Mark, and takes John Mark with him. And Paul says, I'm not going to travel with this John Mark who betrayed us or who deserted us in Pamphylia. If you know about, there's a break in Acts between Paul and his new disciples, forget their names, Titus I think he takes on then, and Timothy, perhaps. Titus and Timothy overlap. But in any case, Barnabas no longer travels with Paul. In Galatians, Barnabas breaks with Paul. And Peter breaks with Paul. Galatians 2. But they will not cooperate with him in work and mission. Not Paul, but anyone who has behaved in the way they're describing, they will stop cooperating. For all the holy ones of the Most High have cursed him. And this is the judgment which will be upon those who reject the Torah among the first and the last. Well, we've heard a lot about who rejects the Torah. And here's the first and the last language. Who have put idols on their heart and walked in stubbornness of their heart. again, I don't want to keep talking about Paul, but he does have a lot to say about, well, he is stubborn, and he does have a lot to say about heart and how his teaching, he's writing on his community's hearts. But they put idols on their heart and walk in stubbornness of the heart. Now, another name for this group, they shall have no share in the house of the Torah. So now we've heard a second name. They are disciples of God. They are the house of the Torah. They shall be judged according to the judgment on their confederates who turned aside with the men of scoffing, that is plural, because they spoke mistakenly about the laws of righteousness and rejected the covenant and the compact. People who deserted the compact or the covenant in the land of Damascus, which they raised in the land of Damascus. And this is the new covenant. The new covenant land of Damascus, that's the well of living waters. And neither they nor their family shall have a share in the house of the Torah. And from the day of the gathering of the guide, this is Yoreh again, as earlier, instead of Moreh, which is teacher. Yoreh is pourer out of, so the translation here might be guide. Of the community until the end of all the men of war who walked with the man of lying. There were violent people who walked with the man of lying. 40 years. And in that era, the wrath of God will be kindled against Israel, as it is saying, there is no king, no prince, no judge, none to rebuke with righteousness. But the penitence from sin in Jacob, that goes back to the penitence of Israel, kept the covenant of God. Then these men, each shall speak to his neighbor, strengthening his brother, supporting their steps in the way of God. And God hearkened to their words and heard. And a book of remembrance was written out before him for God-fearers. God-fearers is the name used in this period for Gentiles attaching themselves to the Jewish community. And remember in those passages in Paul, 1 Corinthians, when he talks about the Last Supper, and in the Last Supper in Matthew and Mark, and Luke basically reprised what Paul says in 1 Corinthians. But in Matthew and Mark, they say, this is the cup of the New Testament in my blood. Drink this in remembrance of me. You got that? Drink this in remembrance of me. That's why I call my book the New Testament Code. And a book of remembrance would be written out. See, this is the Pauline gospel sacrament. I guess it's, what do you call it? Eucharist? No, the Eucharist is the bread of it. In any case, it's the sacrament of drinking the blood of Christ that is going to make you into a saved person, basically. So it's being applied to Gentiles, God-fearers. And here, in a book of remembrance was written out before him for God-fearers. So again, I see the parallels. You may not, you not see them, but the word remembrance bangs away on the bell of one's recognition. Whether you think it's important or not, I don't know, but connected to God-fearers, it is very important. And those who consider or reckon his name, that is, God-fearers, they'll have a book of remembrance written for them, and those who reckon his name. Whose name? God's name or Jesus' name? I don't know. But his name, until God shall reveal salvation, Yeshua, Jesus. Jesus in Hebrew is Yeshua. Jesus in Hebrew is Yeshua, or salvation. Here it is. A book of remembrance. We've written out. This is why you see manuscript B is so important. It's got all new stuff in it, not in manuscript A. This is column 20 from manuscript B. Until God shall reveal Yeshua and Sadakah, justification. Again, to those fearing his name. That is the God-fearers of line 42. So I don't know what that means to reveal Yeshua to those fearing his name, but later on, we're going to have them see Yeshua. And the wicked between this, it may not mean anything, it may just be accidental. Why consider all the language here charged? And so now we're on the last column, thank God. Then you shall return and see the difference between the righteous and the wicked, between the servant of God and he who does not serve him. For he does mercy to the thousands, we heard that earlier, to them that love him. Oh, there it is, the love commandment, the second one. Loving God. If you look in the letter of James, just quickly, because I'm at the end of this we're going to go home. Oh God, if I can find it here. Hurry. My New Testament is falling to pieces, as you see. It's so mess, but this is because it's got Greek and English, that's why you Yes! Chapter 2. For a man of gold rings and fancy clothing comes in your gathering, and you are a poor man in dirty clothes also comes in, and you have been mean to the poor man, again, the Ebion, and you stand there and you sit under my footstool, and did you not become judges with evil judgments? My beloved brothers, hear this. Did not God choose the poor of this world, line 5, rich in faith, heirs to the kingdom, which he promised to those who love him? The kingdom, loving God, those who love him, that's piety. The kingdom promised to those who love him. And then he goes on. Do you not blaspheme the good name by which you were called, the name again? If you truly keep the royal law according to Scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you do well. But if you have partiality towards person, you work in being found guilty of the law as lawbreakers. For whoever shall keep the whole law, but shall stumble at one point, he is guilty of breaking it all. And then he goes on to criticize the man who thinks you are saved only by faith. But anyway, he has both the commandments, loving God, the kingdom prepared for those who love him, and loving your fellow men. To the thousands of them that love him, line 40, line 21 of manuscript B, 2021. And to his keepers for 1,000 generations. We've heard about that. But the men of the house of Peleg, I have no idea what that means except perhaps separation, who went out from the place of holiness, relied upon God during the era of Israel's rebellion and pollution of the temple, but turned aside from God among the people, probably peoples, again, probably the Herodians, I think peoples are Herodians, the things that were for them of little importance, they shall be judged, each man according to his spirit in his holy counsel. And with the appearance of the glory of God to Israel, all among the members of the covenant who transgress the boundary of the Torah, again, not to the right or left, don't transgress one word, shall be cut off. There's cut off again for the 5th time in this document, from the midst of the camp. We'll hear later, don't move to the right or the left. And with them all the evil ones of Judah, they're wicked Jews too, by the way. The evil ones of Judah in the days of its trials. However, those who hold fast to the statutes, coming and going in accordance with the Torah, and listen to the voice of the teacher, and confess before God, and now here's their confession of sin, their repentance. We have sinned, we have been wicked, here's quote, we and our fathers, because they walk contrary to the laws of the covenant. Couldn't get more repentance than this. But your judgments upon us are truth, nor will we lift up our hand against the holiness of his laws and the righteousness of his judgments and the testimonies of truth. Rather, we have been instructed in the statutes of the ancestors, in which the men of the community were judged, unquote. That's the prayer they're supposed to say. And they shall listen, now we hear about them again for the second or third time, to the voice of the righteous teacher, or the teacher of righteousness, and not depart the laws of righteousness. The laws could simply be the laws of righteousness, I guess. But rather, when they hear them, they shall exult and rejoice, and their hearts will be strengthened, and they shall prevail or be victorious against all the sons of the earth. And God will make atonement through or for them, and they will see his salvation. See his Yeshua. That's what it says. see his Yeshua, because they took refuge in his holy name. Amen. That's about as pious as you can get. They will see his salvation because they took refuge in his holy name. Okay, you guys, think about that. Next time, we can go slower. We went over the most important document, and we can pick up some of the other stuff in the next 2 times. So we're on track. Sorry to have bored you. Sorry if you didn't have a book and couldn't follow. I read it to you. You followed it, how did you? Oh, the attendance sheet. Come back, come back. Here's the attendance sheet. What's today's date? What's the date? 11. Yeah, we want this here, 26. Yeah, here, get out of your way.
Shipping was like $4.
Attendance.
The community rule.
So, well, how'd you like that document?
Like that one I could follow. It's the community.
That's it. Well, I'm gonna